Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It's a pleasure to have you join us today. We look forward to your participation. I'm Bob Jukowski, Managing Partner for On-Demand Advisors, and we're really excited to have you join us today as we're preparing for your success for 2025. So this month, this webinar, and next month in January, we're really going to dive into how do we actually equip you for success? And I don't mean just the next step, but great success next year. And so today, our topic is going to be gaining consistency and clarity to hit your numbers in 2025. I like to point out these two words. Consistency is the first one. And what I mean by consistency is that your revenue growth that you have as you're going throughout next year is very predictable. It's consistent. A lot of times when we work with executives, we find it's lumpy. So in other words, you may have a great quarter, you may have a great event, you may have a great campaign, but a lot of this comes down to consistency, month in and month out, knowing with certainty what you're going to achieve, having the intentionality around that, and achieving the success that you want. So we're going to talk about that today. The other word that comes to mind is clarity. Clarity is really, for those of you that are CEOs and business owners, a lot of times sales, marketing, business development, these can be, I call them black boxes. And what that basically means a lot of times is you're delegating authority, responsibility to somebody on your team to deliver the results. We like to make sure that you've got the right people on the team, but we also believe as an executive, you should have transparency to the process. Understand how you're going to manage and really master the revenue creation process. So we're going to talk about that today. There's a number of areas we want to cover in today's webinar. The first is just talking about strategy. So strategy is really important. For a lot of people, it's more than just a number. We're going to talk about how to think about strategy for 2025. We're going to talk about how do you put in best practices for revenue growth and the system, if you will, that's going to enable that scalability that you're looking for. We're going to talk about creating a playbook. The playbook is basically your step-by-step process of how you achieve that success. And so both today, but in the next webinar that we have in January, we're actually going to walk you through the creation of your playbook so that you understand step-by-step areas that you may want to consider and deploy in terms of creating the playbook and deploying the playbook for your success. Next is execution. A plan without execution is no plan at all. So we want to talk about executing with success and velocity. And then finally, we want to talk about some examples today. We're going to talk about 4 of our clients. One client wanted to grow revenue by 100% year over year. Another client wanted to go and grow revenue by 50% year over year. A third, 33%, and a fourth, 25%. So we're going to quickly touch upon these 4 clients because we've helped each of them do that. And so when we talk about intentionality, we talk about outcomes. That's really what's important today, is knowing that not only do these best practices work in practice, but we actually have clients that are proof points for that. So again, thank you very much for joining us today. We want to give you tremendous insights, best practices, and knowledge that you can take with you today as you head and prepare into 2025. Okay. Just a little bit about our firm, On-Demand Advisors. We've been in business now for going on 14 years, and we are a strategic acceleration partner. So there are companies out there that are marketing agencies. There are companies out there that are sales consultancies, if you will, and they're great companies. We take it to one step up at a more strategic level to look at the business through your eyes as the CEO, as the business owner, and as an entrepreneur, and think about what needs to be put in place to actually make this happen. So we're very strategic in terms of the work that we do with our clients. We're also very intentional. We're very metrics and data driven. And our approach is tailored specifically to your needs. So it's not a cookie cutter approach of knowing the answer before the question. Craig and I did found the company a number of years ago. So we've got quite a few people that work for us in 4 different teams. So when we started the company, we realized to help our clients succeed, we needed to make sure that we could actually supplement the resources that they needed to get the job done. Even though we create strategic plans for our clients every day and do that and help them look at what's the right way to approach this, a lot of times it comes down to executing the plan too. So I've been a CEO for private and public companies in Silicon Valley, technology and services companies. And I built companies all different stages. But that serial experience has given me a foundation to share with you today. Likewise, Craig Remy, my partner with On Demand Advisors, Craig came from a chief marketing officer background, again with private and public companies in Silicon Valley, technology companies, services companies. But before that, he was a branding executive. So a lot of this is about expanding your brand. A lot of it is building your brand. A lot of it is making you a leader in your space. So these are just areas that excite us. And then, of course, inside of our company, we've got a number of other partners that work for us, heading up different areas like sales and business development, marketing, and of course, all the other areas that we have around strategy, of course, which is kind of a catch-all. As we go through today, some of you are coming to this webinar and you're the CEO or business owner of a startup. Some of you are mid-stage companies that are really looking at laying in track and doing that the right way in terms of scaling. Some of you are coming here as public company executives, and you're looking for predictability, consistency, and there's always white space. I had the good fortune of working at all size companies. So when I was with a company, RightWorks, at one time, I came in there as chief revenue officer for the company, and we had no sales. We had 0. We had a good solution that we had engineered, but we really had no traction whatsoever. And working together and building out the team organically and building out that organization, we were able to take the company from 0 to $100 million in annual revenue in 2 years. And phenomenal experience. If you look at a mid-stage company like Intact, I was the CEO at Intact and Craig was the CMO at Intact. Software as a service company focused on financial applications, financial management solutions for multi-entity companies. We helped build that company and scale that company tremendously. Half of our revenue came from our direct sales organization that we built. The other half came through sell-through partners. And just such tremendous dynamic scaling of the company that we were able to do. And it did lead to the acquisition by Sage for the company for $850 million. So these practices that we talk about today will give you what you need, not only if you're a startup, but also in terms of if you're a mid-stage company looking at the scale and grow like Intact. And then finally, big companies. I had the great fortune of working at companies like with companies at Oracle and Dun & Bradstreet, but also we've worked with many other clients like SAP, for instance, in helping them figure out where's the white space that they need to address to scale. So let's talk about our 4 steps for today's webinar. The first is starting with strategy. And with strategy, I always look at when you're thinking about next year and how you're going to grow successfully your revenue growth for the company, it's one of 2 things. It could be a combination. But the question you ask yourself is, what are you going to do differently in 2025 versus 2024? And when we engage and work with clients strategically, there's typically a couple ways to think about this. One way is, how are you going to do more of what you need to get done? So for instance, you may have a great solution and we need to take that to market and just do more programs, more outreach, more branding, and so forth. But more often than not, it's about doing things differently. A lot of companies we work with hit ceilings for revenue growth, and those ceilings we have to help them break through those ceilings. So if you're a $5 million company and you want to get to 10 as the next step, we've got to figure out how to break through that range and do something differently. And that's very often what we're doing with our clients. So when we think about strategy, we think about these type of questions. You may come to today's webinar and say, I need to grow revenue by 50% year over year, which is great. But as we dig into that number, we've got to think about who are the customers that you want for this year. So intentionality is about what are the outcomes that you want to achieve so that you can achieve that numerical number, which is $50 million. Another question that we ask when we think about strategy is, what's the plan that you have to overcome obstacles or ceilings that you may have today? Every company that's growing and intelligently growing is going to have ceilings or obstacles, but we've got to have answers for each and every one of them to knock them down. Another question is, when you're thinking about strategy, is leveraging revenue growth best practices, and we're going to cover some of that today. And then finally, they connect the dots on the bottom. So you start off with strategy, you look at what are the best practices for revenue growth, you create a playbook on how you're going to get from here to there over the next year, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, and then you have to execute against that playbook. So when we think about strategy, let's go to the next area. We want to talk about something I love to talk about, which is how to become a data-driven company. So the first thing is, think about revenue growth vectors for your company. Well, one of those revenue growth vectors is new customer acquisition. So we're talking about that on this slide. And if our goal is to increase your number of new customers and achieve this revenue vector growth, you want to add another $4 million of revenue growth in 2025. Well, there's 3 funnels, and we're big on the 3 funnels because we want to be data-driven. This is your marketing funnel. This is your sales lead development funnel, and this is your sales funnel. So we've got to interrogate this as we think about how we're going to get from here to there. What's great about this, though, as you put this model in place from a strategic perspective, you start gaining clarity on what needs to happen every month to make this model work. So for instance, if we would help you do this and we wanted to achieve the $4 million number, we know that we need to create 133 market qualified leads every month. We need to convert those into 13 sales qualified opportunities. And then we need to convert those 13 into 3.4 closed transactions or customers per month. It really keeps us on track as we think about that. By the way, this exercise is something we'd love to sit down and do with any of you, to sit down and look at your business and start thinking about it the way you think about it, which is, where are you going to get the revenue from? Which markets, which sectors, and so forth, in which areas. So this is just on new customer acquisition. How about current customers? So one of the things that we talk about, and we just had a webinar on this recently, was on Customer Reconnect Program, which we've helped many clients put in. And that's really reconnecting and expanding the wallet share with current customers. So in this case, we've got better metrics in terms of conversion rates, which you normally would expect when you're looking at expanding the wallet share with your customers. But the other thing that we really are good at doing in this process is thinking about the whole solution from the customer's perspective and expanding that with you. One of our clients that we did this with last year, we just did a customer reconnect program with them. They were able to increase their revenue year over year by 20%, specifically through that program. So this is the second revenue growth vector for discussion, which is customer expansion. Let's talk about the third one, partner sales. When you are selling and providing your services or solutions to any market, there is an ecosystem that is serving that market today. Many of those companies that are in that ecosystem are potential partners for you. So one of the things that we're big advocates at for on-demand advisors is to looking at how can you leverage relationships and partnerships with these other partners out there. They could be channel partners or they may be strategic partners. One of the things that we did at Intact very successfully was we built out our partner organization, our partnerships that we had, so that half of the revenue could be driven through our partner channel. So this could be a very significant revenue contributor for you and for most companies. There's another revenue growth vector I'd like to talk about too, and that's every year you're thinking about launching new services or solutions. When you do that, the challenge a lot of times, if you're like me as a CEO and you're investing into a new solution or a new service, that is an investment, that's an expense. What we're really interested in is how do we actually turn that around and get a 4x return or a 10x return in that investment. So one of the things that we really think about is when you're launching a new service or new solution, how do we not only just launch it, but how do we prepare for the launch and how do we make sure we follow up after the launch to turn that interest into sales? So if you think about each of these revenue growth vectors, new customer acquisition, customer expansion, channel or partner sales, and then new services or new solutions, you can very easily see in this example how you can add another $8 million of revenue going into 2025. So that's on the strategy piece. The next area I'd like to talk about is what's the system? What is your system that you have for revenue growth? So we talked about earlier that the revenue creation process is just that. It's a process that every company has to master. And so when I was a CEO at Intact, I realized we needed to create a revenue acceleration system. And so we created this at Intact, and now we've perfected this system working with hundreds of B2B companies. And so we're sharing that with you today, the latest incarnation of that system. But I'm going to specifically just take time and walk this through for each of you as you're thinking about planning for next year, because you do need a system like this. Some of these things that you have on here on this infographic, you already have in place. Some things you don't. Some things are working great. Some things are working poorly. But the key here is this has to be optimized for your company. It has to be optimized for next year. So down below in the revenue engineering area, we've got the 3 funnels. Here's the marketing, lead conversion, and then sales. And you can see they're underneath each of these panels. Up here in red, we've got another area around strategy. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. We typically look at creating strategic playbooks for companies, and that becomes the roadmap, the blueprint, if you will, for what needs to get done in 2025, 26, and so forth. And it really is good because the challenge I had as a CEO, and I think you probably have it too, is there are a lot of things you can do simultaneously, but you don't have money or resources to do all of them. So what you really have to do is you have to prioritize, and the playbook helps you really prioritize around that. The other things that are typically in the strategic realm here is mapping out the markets you're going to go after and the buyers. Really understanding the buyers, because the more you can get in the head of the buyer, the more you can understand what are their motives, what is their receptivity to your service, what is the prioritization of your messaging, and what offers or information do they need from you to accomplish the buyer's journey. And then finally, we spend a lot of time helping companies put in the underlying infrastructure, and that would include a marketing automation system, includes CRM, and includes sales enablement and social platforms. So a lot of times this may be plumbing, but how you put the plumbing in to actually help the organization is very important. It needs to be coupled with best practices. So as we think about the funnels that we just went through, looking at the different revenue growth vectors, number 3 is really important. it's where everything starts, and that's creating the demand that you need. And we help companies put in a demand generation engine, demand acceleration engine. And the engine has 9 components, and we put in all 9 components. We make sure the engine is operating at full efficiency, and then we help companies scale it. So, for instance, one company may say, um, a good example is Ray White. When he came to, he's the chief performance officer at ICUC, which is a social media management services company. He came to this webinar a couple years ago, and he says, "Guys, I need your help. I'm generating about 30 to 50 leads per month, and to make my numbers, to grow the revenue, to grow the company, I need to 5x that. I need 250 leads per month." So we actually worked with him and his team to put in our demand generation engine and scale that to exceed 250 leads per month. That really did change the trajectory for ICUC. The other thing we talk about is most of you, well, all of you, you have a website today. So the website today, to varying degrees, can actually help your sales process or inhibit it. Here's what I mean. It can help your sales process if you're guiding the buyer through the buying process on site, on the website. It can help your sales process if it mirrors the sales process you would go through if you were in front of the buyer. Where it can inhibit your process is if you ask somebody to fill out a web form because they want to see a presentation or demonstration and hope somebody gets back to you. Or it could inhibit your progress if it's not organized the way the buyer wants to perceive that. So, for instance, at Ray White's company, ICUC, everybody saw themselves in different verticals. So we needed to organize the buyer's journeys by each vertical, by each industry, so that if I'm in pharma, tell me how you're going to help me in pharma. If I'm in food and beverage, like Starbucks, tell me how you're going to help me in food and beverage, and so forth. Once you do get the leads, though, like we had with Ray, 250 leads per month, that's incredible. It's an avalanche of demand. It's the right people in the right markets that are interested in your solution. So the next step is how do we convert them? How do we not only educate them, how do we convert them into be sales-ready opportunities that we can work? And that's really important. So one of the things that we help companies do is really stand up this program. A lot of companies, in fact, most companies don't have this program in place, largely because they don't have the demand. But once you do open the spigot, once you do have the tsunami of demand, it's important to have a playbook on how you're going to convert marketing to sales leads and make that conversion. And then in 5 and 6, this is all about sales. So with your sales team, building out the sales playbook, their step-by-step process, how do you enable their success? One of the things that I think Craig and I learned a long time ago is that when you have a sales team, you've got to equip them for success. Number one is you've got to equip them with the plethora and quality and quantity of sales opportunities that they need to go work on. Number two is you've got to give them the sales tools that are going to help move that buyer through each step of the buying process. So whether that's a success story, whether it's a buyer's guide, whether it's an ROI guide, whether it is a self-navigated demonstration, all of these things are going to be important to be able to create to enable that process. Now, number 6 is interesting on here, and these are what we call sales initiatives. One of those sales initiatives is top grading for talent. There are a lot of companies we work with that ask us to evaluate their sales team today with the leadership and then figure out how do they need to bring aboard some new executives. There's one company in Austin we're working with today where we actually help them bring aboard a new VP of sales, new sales executives, a new sales consultant, and 2 sales development representatives. And that's currently what we're at. But not only bring them aboard, but also onboard them, train them, and really help them reach excellence in terms of their profession. This next area is what we call the Sales Performance Program, the Customer Reconnect Program I talked about earlier, and then ABS, Account-Based Selling. So some of you today that are coming to today's webinar are focused on selling into maybe the SMB or mid-market. Some of you are focusing on large accounts, strategic accounts. And so those do require different approaches. So we really have a very specific program around ABS, account-based selling. And for that company in Austin that I talked about earlier, we've tiered their target prospects and customers and markets that they work in so that we help them at the top end look at strategically how they're going to work that. And then finally over here is this is all about focusing in on partnerships. How do you make partnerships work? How do you choose the right partners and so forth? So number 2 here is about revenue growth best practices and putting that into your company and making the scale. Number 3, as far as this process we're talking about today, is creating your playbook. So I'll just touch on this today, but we're going to get more into this on the next webinar. We've figured out the playbook is really your roadmap. It takes into account your strategy. It looks at the revenue engineering model that we talked about as far as the funnels. It helps assess where you've been today, where you've been in the past. It helps you look forward in terms of where you want to get to. It gives you the model from how do you get from here to there. And then it gives you the plan forward on how do you implement that playbook. But for any of you that are joining us today, that's really table stakes for us. And a couple examples I could walk through with you today. One of them, for instance, was when we began working with AvidXchange in Charlotte, North Carolina. We did sit down with Mike Prager, who's the CEO of the company. And Mike, just a great CEO. And they are a company that provides invoice management, accounts payable, and e-commerce solutions to their customers. And they've been doing that for like 13 years. And we just asked Mike and said, well, Mike, where do you want to head next year and beyond? And he looked at us and said, you know, guys, if you could help me figure out how to double revenue every year going forward, that would really be helpful. So we did the same thing. We created a playbook for Mike and for his team. We collaborated with them, and then we helped them implement that playbook. Now, in their case, they didn't have a marketing team, so we did all of the marketing for them. But we created over 300 leads per month for their team. We helped them qualify those leads. We helped them convert them into sales opportunities. And then we help them figure out how to have sales velocity to close those. The fourth part of our discussion today is about execution. As we talked about, it's great to have a plan. It's great to have a playbook or blueprint, but you've got to be able to execute that. So what I'd like to do is just take a few moments here and answer some quick questions that we have around this, because this is often the sticky point that a lot of people have. And by the way, as we're going through today's webinar, before we get into customer examples, client examples that I want to walk you through today, I'd love to have you post questions as we're talking and make sure we can address those questions. So one of the things that we often hear about as we talk with clients is, I don't have the marketing resources to execute the playbook, or I don't have the marketing resources to get the job done. So what do I do? Well, one of the things I would tell you about execution is you've got to be able to execute every step of the game. So you've got to be able to execute marketing, you've got to execute sales, you've got to execute services, you've got to be able to execute partner management and partnerships. It's not unusual when we work with a company that they don't have the marketing resources in-house to get the job done. So what we do at On-Demand Advisors is we do have the team. And so when we work with you, our job is to do all of the execution work that needs to get done and do that on a variable cost basis so that you're not investing in a lot of headcount today, a lot of fixed cost, but instead we're focusing the money on the programs, the campaigns, the channels that you're going to need to extend into to get the reach that you need. Another question that we have around execution is, hey, great playbook, but I'm a startup. So will this work for me too? And the answer is yes. And the reason the answer is yes is because when you think about this, the area where you can least afford to make a lot of mistakes is when you're a startup. And the reason why is because you're still trying to figure out how you're going to put LayTrack going forward. And the thing you don't want to do is you don't want to just waste a lot of time, waste a lot of money doing the wrong things. So making the right decisions when you're a startup is really important. So this map that we just went through, the revenue acceleration system, really gives you kind of insight in terms of the set of best practices that you want to think about putting into 2025. Another question when we talk about the first funnel that we often hear from you as an audience is, how long will it take me to start creating the demand that I'm going to need if I put in this process or this program? And the answer is usually about a quarter. So once we start getting the strategy laid out, and we start putting in the demand generation engine and those 9 components, then you start really generating the first funnel. And that's exciting for most companies because now you're starting to get, if you will, that fulcrum going to get the car running, and you're moving forward with velocity so that you can move those marketing leads into the next stage and then finally into the sales stage. Here's another question that we often get, and all of you coming to today's webinar, you do have a team, a one way, shape, or form in terms of sales team. And if you're like me, no matter how good you are at hiring, you always find yourself with I call the ABCs. And so we've got A players, God love them. We wish we had more of them. We've got B players, which is usually the majority of them. And we've got some C players, those that just are not hitting their quota, not making their numbers. And so one of the things that we look at when we're thinking about the resources that you have in place today is, how do you get excellence? How do you get consistency across the team? And so we're really focusing in big time on thinking about sales performance and how you're going to move the needle on that. Now, if you're a startup, and let's say you're a small company, we have a program we call the CEO as the CSO, meaning that as an executive, as the CEO of the company, you need to be the best salesperson ever, the chief sales officer. And so one of the things that we really focus on is working with the CEO to close the next 20 or 30 deals so that you actually have total visibility, total comfort in terms of understanding how that's going to get done. That way, when you bring aboard your lieutenants, you bring aboard your team, it's not a black box. You get it, you understand it, it's transparent. So these are some common questions that we often hear. And what I wanted to do is kind of open it up for additional questions that you may have on today's webinar. Okay. So let me go ahead, and what I'm going to do here is we do have some questions. I'm going to hold off right now on answering some of these questions because I want to do that. Some of them require some one-to-one discussions, so we're going to follow up with you on that. But let's recap before I move on to the next area. We talked about some very specific things to get you prepared for success next year. One is strategy. How do you think through the strategy beyond just the number of what you want next year? 2 is having a system of best practices that you can implement because revenue creation is a connected system. 3 is creating your own playbook so that you actually have a step-by-step process of what you're going to do Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, 2025, 2026, and 2027 to actually realize the success you're looking for. And then finally, execution. So let's talk about a couple of our clients and how we've helped them manifest this. The first one is AvidXchange. We talked a little bit about them. One of the things that they wanted to do is they wanted to grow, like we said, 100% year over year. So over the course of 4 years, we helped them grow from a $6.5 million company to a $65 million in annual revenue. They didn't have a marketing team in place, so we did all of the marketing for them. All of the offers, the campaigns, the administration, the tactical work, the strategic work, the branding, and just really helped them move the needle. So I won't go through all these areas, but it was just a wonderful thing to work with them on. The other thing that I think is really important when we talk about AvidXchange is sales velocity. One of the challenges when you're providing a solution, in this case a subscription solution, is that your cost of acquisition can be too high. When your cost of acquisition is too high, when you start thinking about marketing, sales, and acquisition costs that you have for new customers, it pushes out your break even that you have. You still have to pay commissions, you still have to pay for all the resources, you still have to pay for all the steps that you have to go through to get that new customer aboard. But for many of you, the price points have come down significantly over the years. And so sales velocity is very important. And so one of the things that we did with AvidXchange is really help them move that cost of acquisition down from up to 3 years as a break even down to 9 months. So that's AvidXchange. Here's another company. This is a company that provides just services, focusing on social media, and just an extraordinary company, ICUC, in 36 different countries, having a footprint there. So when Ray White came to one of our webinars like we're having today, he came with a need. He knew that he needed to grow revenue by 50% year over year. And he knew that his current execution was not going to give him the ability to go do that. So we complemented his team, we collaborated with him, and as you can see here, we did a 5x on lead volume with him. We helped him put it in his infrastructure for marketing and for sales. We helped him put in a new website that was vertically based by each industry. And one of the things that was really interesting here is we helped him follow up on those 250 market qualified leads every month and turn them into appointments for the sales team. So again, just really very interesting. The other thing that we did at ICUC, though, that was very exciting was we helped them launch a number of new social media management services. And what we found is that we were helping them launch a lot of point services. So you started looking at the services, and it's very hard for your sales team to sell a bundle of different point solutions. So we created something called the Social Customer Journey for ICUC. And so all their services, the 12 services that we had, could actually be utilized to actually at different phases of that journey to help customers succeed. So whether their customer was Starbucks, Novartis, Macy's, Ralph Lauren, and many other iconic brands, it was really important for us to actually help them go back in and expand upsell, cross-sell programs into their current customer base. Another customer that we have is Cavinci. Cavinci is a great customer, helping them grow their business by 33% year over year. And again, just increasing significantly the demand volume that they have today. We're in the process of helping them put in their sales-driven website, help to put it and implement their marketing and CRM infrastructure, and then really help them hire a complete sales team. Put that team in place, get them up to speed, get them performing, scale them, and help them succeed. We also help them break apart between their strategy and attack mode, if you will, for entry-level customers, mid-market customers, and strategic customers. So being able to tier the approach that we've been able to work with them on. And then finally, technical toolboxes. technical toolboxes in Houston, focusing on engineering performance management solutions in the oil and gas industry. And again, really kind of helping them think through how they were going to consistently grow from 25% year over year and do that consistently as we've been able to do that with TTI. So some of the major takeaways I would say here that we found, again, is that they had some really interesting point solutions that they offered to their engineering teams in each of these different companies. But what we wanted to do was elevate that experience. So when we started looking at this, we started looking at what are the set of engineering tools to manage corrosion? What are the set of engineering tools to manage pipeline integrity? And so we were able to take these different point solutions, put them into an optimized bundle, and associate them with executive that would actually relate to that and embrace it. It significantly helped them increase their price points. And we also helped them put in a sales-driven website so that you could come in and look based upon solution or based upon functional need, how you're going to navigate that. So just, again, 4 different types of customers that we work with today. And one wanted to grow revenue by 100%, 50%, 33%, and then 25%. And as you're thinking about 2025, and the whole purpose of today's webinar is to prepare for that, is thinking about not only the number, but how do you get there? What's the playbook that you need to get there? So out of today's discussion for today's webinar, may I suggest a couple different next steps for your consideration. One is to look at our link here, and we'll be following up with each of you today from today's webinar. Dale and I will be following up with you personally, is to see if you'd like to set up a discussion just to talk about your strategic and revenue growth goals for next year. So this is complimentary. We want to share with you ideas around strategy and execution, and love to be able to do that. Another next step that you may want to consider is thinking about how do you take that revenue acceleration system with its best practices, and how do you think about manifesting that into your company? And that's another great exercise to go through. A third one is creating that playbook. So really creating your playbook, what's the process we need to go through to be able to do that with you? And then how do you look at that phase playbook and getting that implemented in your company? And then finally, of course, continue your journey with us. So as we talked about, next month, we're going to have, in January, we're going to have a webinar just like today on implementing and creating your 2025 revenue acceleration playbook. So love to walk you through an example and share that with you. Coming up also in February, we're going to talk about something transformational. So a lot of times, if you're like me, you're looking for those shifts that you're going to have in your organization that are transformational. So what's going to enable you to go win your target markets in 2025? What's going to enable you to significantly market and message and position better than you did this year? What's going to enable you to really sell and scale for sales performance in 2025? So we're going to cover that in February. And then in March, we're going to talk about how your website can accelerate your sales cycle by up to 50%. This is extraordinary. When you think about cost of sales, you think about long sales cycles. We want to talk about how a transformational website, we call it a sales-driven website, can actually really take your buyer through that whole process. Take them through the education, take them through the preference setting, take them through the knowledge and assimilation that they need with you. So by the time one of your salespeople is involved, that work is already done. That work is truly, truly done for you. Now, the other reason why this is important in terms of being able to execute that process on your sales cycle is if you're selling to teams today, a lot of times you don't have the face-to-face with the teams like you used to before COVID. So a lot of people are doing things virtually, just like we're doing today. A lot of folks are when you can get them, you only get so many people to come to your discussion, like today's presentation. So you want to basically make sure that your website is aligned with your sales and buying process. And so we're going to discuss that in March. So as we're wrapping up today's webinar and thinking about how do you gain consistency and clarity to hit your numbers in 2025, please do reach out to us. Reach out to myself or Craig. We're great to get you started in terms of next steps that we talked about. You can call us, you can email us, you can visit our website and send us a request. But please engage, because this is about follow through. For all of us today, it's kind of like thinking about great example is, and I'll leave you with your thoughts on this. It's kind of like going in 2025 and saying, I want to lose weight in 2025, and I want to lose, let's say, another 10 pounds, which, by the way, is pretty typical as you head into a new year, especially after eating for the holidays. So when you think about that, you start with the strategy. The strategy is, I want to lose 10 pounds. Great. Next question is, what's the approach I'm going to use to lose that weight? Well, there's a whole series of best practices around that, as far as how you're going to exercise, how you're going to eat better, how you're going to have the right nutrition, and so forth. And then after that, you say, okay, now that's great. Now, what's the schedule I'm going to adhere to that's going to keep me aligned with that playbook and keep me going down that path so I can see my progress each week until I can lose the 10 pounds. And then it's finally about execution. So it's just like revenue growth, losing weight as an analogy. It's about how do you actually put in the right assets, the right processes, and the right resources to ensure you're going to have the success you're looking for in 2025. Our goal at On Demand Advisors is help you ensure that success. Our goal is to help you partner and to achieve the success you envision going forward. So it's more than just a number. It's much more than that. And we've got our 4-step process we went through today. So to you today, of course, you got our coordinates and contact information. Thank you very much for joining us today on behalf of Craig, myself, and the entire On Demand Advisors team. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar. We look forward to working with you not only here at the end of the year, but in 2025 and contributing to your success.